Welcome everyone to the second in our speaker series for 2023-2024. My name is Ann Harvey. I'm the first Vice President of BPW Ontario, and I'm excited that everyone is here again with us. Tonight we'll be hearing from our guest speaker after we do the land acknowledgement, the idea statement, and the collect. So we'll get started with that. Go, Jocelyn, if you would do the land acknowledgement. Certainly.
In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, BPW Ontario members acknowledge that we gather on traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Ojibwe Chippewa, the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe, Yatawan Daron, Wendat, Huron-Wendat, Mississaugas of the New Credit, Atikameniksheng, Anishinaabe, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to work with the Indigenous peoples who continue to live in these lands to create a safer and a more abundant future for all women and girls.
Excellent, thank you. And what did we say? Charlotte.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, thanks, Anne. Idea statement, BPW Ontario welcomes all people who identify as women, regardless of race, religion, age, nationality, citizenship, geographic location, ability, marital status, socioeconomic status, education, sexual orientation, or gender identity, and is committed to providing an inclusive, welcoming, and empowering environment for all its members.
Excellent, thank you. And Pauline.
May we see beyond pettiness, fault-finding, and all forms of prejudice. Let us meet each other face to face with honesty, patience, and generosity of spirit. May we go forward, unafraid, confidently putting into action plans that are carefully considered and adequately debated. May we depart with the knowledge that through BPW and our collective energies, we can impact upon the greater good more than can be realized alone. And may we have the strength to abide by our convictions, the reward of sharing our burdens, and the joy of success in all that we do.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to do something a little different. We've never done this before. We're going to go around and say who we are and where we're from in Ontario or in the world. As I said, my name is Ann Harvey and I live in Trenton, Ontario. And I'm going to go across my screen. So Jocelyn, and then Catherine, you'll be next.
My name is Jocelyn Desautel. I live in St. Catharines. I belong to the BPW Niagara Falls Club, the oldest club in the world. It was founded in 1917 on July 17.
And Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Reed. I live in Queenston. I belong to BPW Niagara Falls. I'm a fairly new member, so I'm still learning. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne Nickley, and then Pauline will go.
I'm Ann Nicely. I live in St. Catharines, and I'm a member of, where am I? A member of Niagara Falls, in Niagara Falls, Ontario, which I enjoyed very much. And here I am again.
All right, Pauline.
Hi, my name is Pauline Platt. I'm the president of North Toronto Business Professional Women.
Perfect. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Burris, and I'm a 25-year member of BPW Niagara Falls, but I live in wine country in Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Oof, lovely. Jennifer May Anderson.
I'm Jennifer May Anderson. I live in Belleville, Ontario, and I'm a member of BPW Hastings and Prince Edward.
That's my club. Forgot to say that. Glennon?
Hi, everyone. My name is Glennis McQueen Fuentes, and I'm not yet a member of BPW. I was invited by Sharon Abbey, and I'm thrilled to be here and to listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Charlotte?
My name is Charlotte Hendricks. I'm a professional engineer and I live in London, Ontario, and I'm a member of the BPW Niagara Falls.
Diana?
Hello, everybody. I am Diana Barragan. I'm a regional coordinator of Latin America, BPW Latin America. I live in Ecuador. I am a member of two clubs, one in Mexico and one in Peru. I am a member since 1991. I started in Geneva, Switzerland, but now I'm living in Ecuador. Very glad to be here with all of you.
We're honored to have you, Diana.
My honor.
Birgit?
Unmute. Hello, my name is Birgit von Schmaling. I hope you can hear me. I'm from London Group in London, Ontario.
Okay. Jean Barlow. Oh, we're just doing introductions. You just got on, didn't you, Jean? We're just doing introductions of who we are and where we live in the world.
Oh, are you waiting for me to say something?
Yeah, sorry, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Jean Barlow. I'm from Beamsville, Ontario.
Excellent.
I'm not really a member, but I just coming in.
We welcome. We love it. Toby.
Hi, folks. I am lucky enough to be in Prince Edward County and a member of the BPW Hastings and Prince Edward Club. And so chiming in from my cozy little space in the bustling metropolis, our little village of Consacon on the West Shores.
Great. Pauline, did I get you? You did? Okay. I squares are moving around on my screen. Megan Wood was here. I don't see her now. Okay. And Marlene.
Just had to get the unmute off. Okay, I am Marlene McKinnon. I am the BPW Ontario president currently. I've been with BPW Sault Ste. Marie since 1991, except for 1 year. And I live in Sault Ste. Marie. And I work at the Sault Ste. Marie Conservation Authority, so I'm a GIS specialist and I'm a source water protection program manager.
Happy to have you here, Marlene. And Sharon, I will introduce you. I've got your bio.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Sharon Abbey is a retired professional emeritus at Brock University, where she served as Director of Women's Studies and Director of Adult Education. A popular course that she created includes Creativity and the Adult Learner and Embodied Holistic Learning. As part of her interest in global education, she developed a partnership with schools in South Africa to help students better understand cultural differences as volunteer teachers. Sharon is also a former elementary school teacher, curriculum consultant, and principal. Her experiences as a mother, grandmother, wife, and widow over the past 5 years have helped to shape her perspectives about living a fulfilling, purposeful life. She is the author of the book Redefining Motherhood and considers herself a lifelong creative learner. She is enjoying an active retirement, writing and painting at her cottage retreat. Welcome, Sharon. We're very excited to hear all the things that my mother didn't tell me.
Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak to this very interesting group. I love your club collective. I mean, it's just everything you could possibly want. It's very good. I'm inspired. Earlier this fall, Nancy Brose asked me to speak to the BPW group in Niagara Falls and about lessons I've learned from my life's experience. And I said yes, but then quickly wondered, really, what did I have anything interesting to say? I always find that self-doubt lurking behind me wherever I go. But however, her invitation gave me the opportunity
to braille through my memory bank and gain some new perspectives and insights. She also challenged me to channel my inner Carol Burnett. But as a retired professor, I see myself more as a teacher than as a stand-up comedian. But during COVID, I decided to begin writing my memoir to pass down to my family, which is still a work in progress. But I've selected a few of the stories I wrote to share with you tonight, and I hope they resonate with you in some way. I'm going to read from my notes just to keep on time schedule. And also, I'm still a bit nervous sharing my personal stories, so it kind of helps to have things written in front of me. I've just finished reading Armour Toll's book, The Lincoln Highway, which is excellent, in which he uses the road as a metaphor for a lived life. And one of the characters in the story observes that our personal journeys are never linear or predictable, and every day is a one-of-a-kind day. Think about that. Every day is a one-of-a-kind day. At my age, every day is also a bonus day. In his poem, The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost also uses the same metaphor to highlight the choices we make when we come to a fork in the road. And another favorite poet, Mary Oliver, asks a question that also inspires my stories. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? So, I'm borrowing from these three writers to frame the stories that I tell you, focusing specifically on the potholes I encountered along the road. You know, those things that stop you cold or devastate you or blindside you. If only my mother had told me about those potholes, I would have worn my rubber boots and taken my walking sticks as I set out in life. Instead, I naively started out in my high heels with a designer purse slung over my shoulder. I had attitude, I had panache, but life soon knocked that out of me. As well, my mother never told me about the forks in the road and the consequential choices I would need to make. For example, when I moved to Toronto to begin university, I had the choice of dating a handsome law student I met at a fraternity party, or stick with my hometown boyfriend who'd focused more on basketball than his schoolwork. Well, I suppose I'd read too many fairy tales, so I went with the older, good-looking, charming guy who would lead me to happy ever after. And guess what? We married, he cheated on me, and sadly, we divorced after 7 years. But the silver lining, and there always is one, I became the proud single mother of 2 amazing children. Now, betrayal and deception create huge potholes. I needed combat boots rather than rubber boots to get past those roadblocks. Why didn't my mother ever tell me that infatuation is often disguised as love, and that good looks are just a superficial veneer? Marriage is about finding a lifelong friend who has your back. I did find such a guy further down the road, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We all tell stories, but I wonder how many of us truly appreciate their power. Daniel Pink, the author of A Whole New Mind, tells us that as humans, we all have a primal desire to impose order on our lives through storytelling. But in order to tell your personal stories, you must engage in the process of self-reflection. First, the trick, I believe, is to use this process deliberately and often. Otherwise, life just slides by and it disappears. As you revisit your memories, turning them over and sifting through the hidden layers, they will reveal important themes, insights, and timely lessons worth savoring. It's quite a magical process. Sometimes we must be patient and coax our stories out of their hiding places. keep pulling on that red thread that pokes through the crack in the floor, as Stephen King likes to say. But the exciting thing about stories, as Emily Smith points out in her book, The Power of Meaning, is that we are the authors of our own stories, and we can choose to change them and tell them any way we like. It's like having a huge deck of cards that you can endlessly shuffle in a kind of self-reflective solitaire. I stand on the shoulders of a long line of brave, tenacious women. I traced my maternal roots back to my great-great-grandmother, who left Ireland during the potato famine in 1854 and bought cheap passage to New Brunswick on a coffin ship. So many were dying from the famine that Ireland ran out of timber to make coffins and had to import them from abroad. At about the same time, on my father's side, my great-great-grandfather sailed from the Isle of Skye in Scotland to New Brunswick to serve the growing community along the Miramichi River as a Presbyterian minister. Ironically, years later in the mid-1930s, when my mother announced that she was going to marry my father, the minister's great-grandson, her father picked her up by the coat collar and threw her out the door. No Irish Catholic daughter of his was going to marry a Presbyterian. So she bravely walked away and eloped. Good on her. The sudden death of my father at age 52 was the first deep pothole I encountered along the road. He suffered a fatal heart attack on a hunting trip just before my first child was born. He would never get to meet his grandchildren, and they would never get to know their granddaughter or their grandfather. Years later, I would find myself sitting beside my children in the hospital ICU as the medical team slowly took their own father off life support 2 weeks after an unsuccessful surgery. I'm not sure which was worse, the pain of losing my father or the pain of watching my children lose theirs. My mother never told me about how to navigate the potholes of loss that seemed insurmountable and leave holes in your heart. But staring into the bottomless abyss, somehow you must find a way to get to the bottom, sit there for a while to catch your breath, and then figure out how to climb up the other side and keep going. And by doing so, you learn important survival skills that make the next crater easier to circumvent and your skin just a little thicker. You also realize how fragile life is as you sit in the cold darkness, and you promise yourself you will never waste one moment of your wild and precious life. Ironically, death pushes us past the superficial towards a deeper engagement with life. I wish my mother had told me to tuck a long piece of rope in that designer purse I carried. It would have been useful for climbing out of some of those deep potholes. Well, death is often followed by birth. When one life ends, another begins, and joy replaces despair. Again, this is also ironic, isn't it? 2 months after my father died, I gave birth to my daughter. However, it was not in the sterile hospital delivery room I had imagined, but on the cold vinyl car seat on an early December morning. As my husband raced down the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto, headed for Women's College Hospital, I felt the baby's head crown. A split second later, she shot from my body into the frigid winter world and was crying with all her might. She knew what to do. I did not. Time stood still as I scooped her up and put her on my stomach, the only place that was warm and clean. My husband began driving at top speed. A police car chased us with lights flashing, but my husband kept going until he pulled into the emergency entrance at the Toronto General Hospital. Everything became a blur. My husband ran inside. The police shone a flashlight in the car window. 2 paramedics arrived and struggled to push the bucket seat forward, dropped the clamps on the dirty floor, cut the umbilical cord, whisked the baby away, put me on a stretcher, and bundled me into an ambulance that took me to the hospital I was actually heading for. The medical team crowded around the elevator door as I was wheeled into the maternity wing, and someone asked me, "Mrs. Abbey, where's your baby?" I had no idea. She'd been forgotten at the other hospital, and a nurse was sent in a taxi to retrieve her. The next morning, when we'd all calmed down and I cradled my baby in my arms, my husband went off to retrieve his abandoned car from the parking lot nearby. When the attendant arrived earlier in the morning and saw the car covered with blood on the seats, he called the police. So my husband had some explaining to do. My mother never told me about the huge responsibilities of single motherhood that I would shoulder alone. I soon became a working mother as well, returning to work as a kindergarten teacher. At the time, the school board was not issuing permanent contracts, so I took on several temporary teaching positions. One contract would end in June, and I would wait until September, hoping to be rehired again and reassigned to a new school. After 4 years of this uncertainty, I applied for a full-time job as a curriculum consultant in a school district 2 hours away. I did not feel remotely qualified for this job and could not fathom moving my family to a new city on my own. But what did I have to lose? It was only an interview, and I was totally convinced that they would never hire me. Well, to my surprise, I received a call from the superintendent the following Monday offering me the job. They needed my answer immediately to ratify at the school board meeting that night. So I had no time to think, and so I said yes. And as soon as I hung up the phone, all my inner critics began screaming at me at once. "What have you done? This will be a disaster." I had no idea what a curriculum consultant actually did, and had little or no experience teaching any of the primary grades beyond kindergarten. However, I was too busy selling one house and buying another on my own. It was not until I sat in my empty office on my first day at the job that I began to panic. I was an imposter. How long would it take them to discover this? This pothole took the form of self-doubt, fear, and terror. My mother never told me that taking risks would lead to amazing places, and that the imposter syndrome was merely a powerful mind game that many women learn to play. In fact, I learned that none of us really know what we're doing when we take on a new job, but we figure it out by actually doing the job. That, I think, is the best lesson I've ever learned in life. I wasn't an imposter, and I did a damn good job. Well, working as a consultant were some of the most fulfilling years of my career. But eventually I sought a new challenge and applied to be a school vice principal. At the time, there were no female administrators in this school board, and the old boys club was thriving. This was back in the 80s. These guys all played volleyball together, and on the day that my appointment was announced, they had their weekly game. Ironically, here's that word again, they did not know that my son was the referee. And they did not hold back on their disdainful comments about me. And as luck would have it, I was assigned to the school in which the principal was the most vocal member of the boys' club. His name was Ken. My mother never told me what the word misogynist meant. She probably didn't even know that word, but Ken displayed every trait. On my first day as his VP, he warned me in no uncertain terms never to let my family get in the way of school business. Oh, I was determined to show him just how well I could separate my mothering from my vice principaling. However, that did not last long. I soon learned that a softer approach to discipline and leadership built on maternal traits of kindness and care worked better than hard-nosed scare tactics. The kids were lining up at my door to talk to me, share their problems at home, and seek the validation they needed to fit in and enjoy school. Later, this experience would become the topic of my PhD dissertation: how teachers, who are also mothers, use their mothering skills to enhance their teaching. Once again, another silver lining from a dark and muddy pothole. Well, the misogynistic principal was promoted to the head office later that year, and so I stepped in as acting principal. I loosened some of the rules and took on the secretary as my co-pilot. I gave her much more responsibility, and she thrived. We both did. The school was a humming, happy place where I could put my innovative curriculum insights into practice. And I fully expected to be appointed as full-time principal of the school the next year. But I was demoted again to VP and had to work under another old boy from the volleyball team. Back we went to a tight ship, and the secretary resumed her former role as lady in waiting. I was pretty much ignored, extremely frustrated and disheartened. And once again, I fell into that damn muddy pothole, and I was probably wearing my white pants. Ironically, my daughter is now a school principal herself, but I think the old boys club has lost some of its punch. Well, I wasn't quite out of the muddy pothole yet. Whoops, I've skipped a page. Members of the Ontario Women Teachers Federation came to my rescue and suggested that I apply for an administrator's position in Toronto, where the women were gaining ground as respected equals. I was offered a job as a VP in a large junior high school in Mississauga, and once again, the imposter syndrome took hold. What did I know about dealing with a whole school of adolescents with raging hormones? The other difficulty was that my son was still at home completing his final year of high school. However, I followed my intuition, an emotion very undervalued in our culture. I rented an apartment in Brampton and left my son at home to finish his term. His friend moved in to keep him company. I trusted them both, and they would soon be on their own anyway. Meanwhile, a young male teacher at my former school decided to move with me when he was offered an exciting position in the music department at a neighboring school. Oh, the gossip. This stirred up. Did you hear that Sharon Abbey is living in Toronto with a man half her age and leaving her poor son to fend for himself? Top, top, top. My mother never told me I would be the hot topic among the gossip mongers either. I think she was somewhat shocked as well, but she never said a word. And in the end, I had the last laugh. Unbeknown to anyone, the young man I lived with was gay, and my son and his buddy did not burn down the house or get kidnapped. In fact, they fast-tracked the school term with top marks and traveled to Europe to study French in Aix-en-Provence. There is a saying that well-behaved women seldom make history, but my resignation from the school board made the headlines of the local paper. I wasn't quite out of the muddy pothole yet. It quickly became apparent that the principal of my new school was totally incompetent. His name was also Ken. His poor secretary was trying to run the school by herself. Unfortunately, she suffered from narcolepsy and fell asleep at her desk several times a day. She ate a box of donuts every day to keep her blood sugar levels up. She had bleached blonde hair, and her makeup was an inch thick. Every phone in the office was smeared with beige goo. And if this was not enough, several new teachers the principal had hired that year proved to be incompetent as well. One poor guy was so desperate that he stole his colleagues' report cards to copy and then lost them. As well, it was a tough neighborhood, and many of the kids had major social problems. I did not know which fire to put out first. And again, I relied on my mothering instincts. In many cases, these tough kids just needed a hug and someone to listen to them. While I was still getting my feet wet that first year, another fork in the road appeared. I was offered a position in the doctoral program at OISE in Toronto and chose to apply for a tenured professorship at Brock University. This required selling and buying a house again, the 11th move in my adult life. But the silver lining is that every move requires purging and letting go, and also leads to new beginnings and directions. I say this as my own daughter prepares to move in 2 weeks. My move brought me back to my hometown and closer to my aging mother, which pleased me. Not that she was aging, but that I could see her more often. Another first day in a new job as a university professor in an empty office, wondering what to do first. I tried to ignore my inner critics once again and tamp down the imposter syndrome bubbling inside of me. Having some practice at risk-taking and trying new things that scared me, I found it easier to muster my confidence and believe in myself this time. At the same time, I was embarking on my doctoral studies in educational leadership, traveling to Toronto once a week after my classes ended. To my surprise, I rounded the corner to find another fork in the road. I took an elective gender course on a whim, and the material we studied spun my head around 360 degrees. How did I get to be 45 years old without realizing how patriarchy had socialized me? I was inspired to push my comfortable boundaries out and re-examine my deeply ingrained beliefs. I changed my major to women's studies, and for the next 4 years, grappled with shock, anger, and some major resentment as I transitioned into a new way of being in this world. I didn't burn my bra, but I came close. My studies eventually led to a position as Director of Women's Studies at Brock University and to writing the book called Redefining Motherhood. More silver linings. One of the things my mother did tell me about was the interesting people I would cross paths with along the way. And one day, a kind stranger peered down at me when I was stuck at the bottom of one of those damn potholes and helped pull me out. He'd recently lost his wife to cancer and was raising 4 young boys on his own. Ignoring the potholes in his own road, he had the capacity to look out for me and my children as well. His motto was 60-40, give 60% and expect 40 in return. Now, this was a guy worth loving. On my 50th birthday, we eloped, just like my mother. Ironically, it was also because of religion. My own Anglican church refused to marry us because I was divorced. I sidestepped this pothole quite adeptly. Finally, I'll tell you about one of the less traveled roads I chose to take. During a sabbatical leave, I accepted an invitation to spend a month as a volunteer in a remote African village in Uganda, living in a small hut with no running water or electricity. The heat was intense, the mosquitoes were fierce, but the experience truly humbling. Orphans as young as 5 were caring for younger siblings. Women traveled for miles to fill their jugs with water or to collect firewood with babies strapped on their backs. And many children could not attend school because they had no shoes. But no one grumbled or cried, and children there were well behaved and respectful. I fell in love with these amazing, beautiful people. I came back from this sabbatical determined to develop a course in international education. And for the next 8 years, I supervised a group of students who traveled with me to South Africa, Namibia, and Ghana to teach in under-resourced schools, volunteer in orphanages, and distribute donated medical supplies in the surrounding slums and townships. I developed a much deeper appreciation for how privileged my life in Canada truly is, and made myself a promise to make the most of my opportunities and give back more than I took. I must admit that it is a challenge not to slide back into complacency and get sidetracked by the little bumps in the road. Vivian, a woman I met there, has reached out to me for support over the years. And recently I helped her buy a computer, and she's completing a diploma course online. A woman I'm so proud of. Now, stories are never ended until you figure out what you've learned. So I'll end this talk with a few of my takeaways. I wish my mother had told me all I would learn from the potholes, but I'm sure I would not have listened to her anyway. Firstly, I'm struck by how often I make reference to books I've read. The brain is a muscle, and books help me keep it active. I am also learning to resist the imposter syndrome before it can stop me from opening new doors. Once in a while, it helps to let go of the familiar and try new things. Death and loss are reoccurring themes in my stories as well. I have not yet found a way to give this theme a positive spin, but the people we lose are never really gone. They live on in our stories and remind us just how precious life is and how our time on this earth is so very short. Also, acts of betrayal and deception are difficult to reconcile, but with time, the sharp edges tend to soften and forgiveness triumphs over bitterness and anger. It takes so much energy to hang on to negative thoughts and is much better directed at something that feels good and lifts your spirits. And remember, there are always silver linings if you look for them. Irony factors heavily in my stories too. Nothing happens by chance. I think I've learned to be more mindful and attentive. I hope to be surprised by something every day. As well, I've learned that intuition, that gut feeling, is a wise inner voice worth listening to, but it is far too underrated, and takes practice to use it well. I've also learned that taking time for self-reflection on a regular basis has huge payoffs. I like to take a little quiet time in the mornings, now that I'm retired, to write in my journal. But by far the biggest lesson my stories have taught me is the benefit of taking risks and seeking new challenges. You don't know what you're doing at first, and it's scary. But with hard work and determination, you learn and you keep learning. And failure, too, is also a very good learning tool. Now, as I stand closer to the end of my road, I am grateful for all those damn potholes. At the time, getting around them was dreadful, but in the long run, they were my best teachers and workout trainers. I can even laugh at them now. They build muscle and stamina, resilience and empathy, and confidence in knowing you can confront your challenges and come out on top. Potholes make you more interesting too. So I hope I've inspired you to seek the power of your own stories, maybe even write your own memoir. I have prepared a list of reflective, probing questions that you might use to start you along on thinking about some of your stories, and also a list of some of my favorite books. And I'll leave those lists with Nancy or someone in the group, and hopefully they can forward those to you. As well, anybody is welcome to contact me. I chose potholes to focus on, but you might choose stories about any theme, your talents, accomplishments, favorite vacations, family traditions, dining experiences, embarrassing moments, deep, dark secrets. There's endless possibilities. So I'm going to stop there and pass it back to our good organizers here.
Thank you so much. I'm waiting for Anne.
Yeah, I was waiting for my my video didn't want to come back on, and oh, everybody can see my messy office now. Sharon,
Messy is good. Messy's good.
we just moved a furniture around. My husband and I are sharing an office now, so
Oh dear.
combining 2 offices into one. Anyway,
That's a challenge.
yes. Thank
Every-
you so much for that. That was so inspiring to read, to hear. Your use of potholes really resonates. Never been a fan, but you do certainly learn from all those bumps and potholes in the roads. And reflection, being 57 now and having a grandchild, I'm doing a lot of self-reflection, and it's much easier on this end, but also a really good tip for young people to stop and do some self-reflection as they go along. So thank you so much. I'm going to open this up for if anyone has any questions. And Marlene just wrote, she's been calling hers chapters. I like that too. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to share with us?
Hi, Anne. Sharon, thank you so much. I attended the Niagara Falls one, and it was fabulous to attend it again.
Oh dear, you had to listen to that twice.
No, very much appreciated.
Yes.
What is it? Self-defamation? Stop. I found it really interesting. You spoke to, you're not to have your family interfere with your work. And it's ironic because the angle I'm looking at from a corporate standpoint about speaking to women getting paid 70 cents on the dollar,
yep,
is 30% of their frontal lobe is still with their families. So there's an actual, like, we can't count on women to be there. There's still a contingent of humanity in them. And so it's always been unfortunate because men are just wonderful nurturers. And for some reason, there's a very the thin layer of, I'm going to call management, that has this really weird, like it just doesn't paint the right picture across the board of men. Is that your experience in terms of like where they think you know your job or don't? Like for some reason, like not applying that nurturing part of them. Like, is it just not cool? Is it that group?
You have to remember, I'm going back to the 1970s and 80s, and the men back then, I think, were socialized very differently than the young men today. You know, my son, for example, and even the younger generation, you know, pitch in and help, you know, try to do equal with childcare and, you know, well, my son grew up to be a feminist, so he certainly wouldn't pull any power trips on women. He wouldn't get far, but he wouldn't want to either. So I think things have changed, and I think men now appreciate their nurturing side. It's not embarrassing. Like in my generation, men,
Sharon, it's not changed. Yeah, it's not changed.
But don't tell me that. Don't tell me.
So, you know, I'm a professional engineer. I think we have people in emergencies worlds, firefighters and things like that. Yeah, it's not changed. So
I think engineering is the last bastion of male domination, is from what I hear.
Yeah, it's just this weird, I wonder if just from your women's studies background, like it just seems to be just a layer, and they hired themselves, right? The old boys club kind of thing. So it's a real, like, I call them like nepotize themselves into stupidity. Like there's really, like, I think I had very similar experience. I won't be too much longer, Anne. Like in my mid-40s, was just like I learned phrases like moral, like ethical blindness. Like as a professional engineer, like we're obligated to take perspectives and understand what our skills are and aren't. And that's the leadership of multi-million-dollar organizations. And I just, like, how did you navigate in that, like, volleyball boys club, those behaviors? Like, I just completely ignored it and double timed my ability, right? Like,
Yeah,
study.
you have to ignore it. And I was going to say that a while ago, I read that the majority of deans now of engineering schools are women. So I
Wow.
think the culture is changing. And my daughter is a school principal, and I don't see that she came online, but I think most of the school principals now are women.
We could say culture, like, I'm engineering your education. It might be like a time phase, right? So, like, we're moving into those leadership roles too, but
yeah.
So I'm sure in your daughter's world, she's probably very much like you broke some ground for her.
Well, I don't know about that, but I know the job today as a school principal is 100 times as stressful and complicated as it was when I was in that field. And it's interesting how the men bail out, and I'm generalizing, and that's not fair. When the going gets tough, they're happy to give it over to the women. And I think most of the school principals now are women.
Yeah, and that fear, I really identified that fearlessness to address those issues. Like, if a kid has a problem, like, you have to be there to listen. Like, I just think you were fabulous. We just have a wonderful leadership style.
Thanks, Charlotte. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I see there's some thank yous from some of the participants. Oh, Anne, go ahead.
I always have a comment. I thoroughly enjoyed you tonight, Sharon. I heard you at the other evening in the Niagara Falls Library as well. I enjoyed that. I felt tonight that you embossed your story just a little more, and I could relate to an awful lot of what you had to say. My mother was a school principal, believe it or not, way back in the time. But that was granted, it was because she was in a very small town where they probably just couldn't find anybody qualified. But at the time, I didn't think that way. I don't think she did either.
Now, would she be in the era where you had to leave the teaching field if you got pregnant?
Yeah, but I think she was past that.
Okay.
See, she was lucky enough to get to teach my sister, but I was gone by then from the house, So it was very interesting. But oh gosh, I had something actually interesting to say other than that. I think you have probably taken the imposter syndrome and explained it away. I hope so anyway. I felt that so many times in my career as well, in my many careers actually. But I can recall when I started teaching, I had never taught before, but nobody knew that because I didn't tell them. And I was probably maybe 35. I don't know how old I was, but I was a lot older than but I had 3 children at the time. And so that made a huge difference in how I could teach, because I had already had a previous career as a medical technologist. And I didn't want to give it up, but I had to, in a sense, because it involved too many nights and whatever. And I couldn't leave my children at home without having well, my husband was there, but in that time, men didn't supervise anything, if you recall.
Working women did double duty for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they didn't know. Well, I immediately was assigned a supervisory role, which made me laugh. because I didn't say anything, but I was terrified, as you were saying earlier. I had to go in there and teach these teachers how to teach, and I never taught before. So you can imagine it was fun and games. But I managed to survive and got through it all, and I'm still bossing people around, so it's okay.
Good for you.
Good for you. Jennifer May Anderson had her hand up. I know her camera's not working, but she did have a question.
Yes, well, more of a comment. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated your talk, and also I think how important women's studies is, because it certainly was in taking a women's studies course at university that opened my eyes up to a lot of issues, because I was very fortunate to have, I'm 49, so that sort of sets me in context historically. I was raised in a very egalitarian home where my dad took part in a lot of the child rearing, and my mother had a career. She was a teacher. And for one of my women's studies projects, I was interviewing women about why they had chosen the careers they chose. These were women who started their careers in the 50s and 60s. And when I asked my mother why she chose to be a teacher, she said that she had three options: being a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. And she said she really didn't want to be a nurse, and she didn't want to have anybody boss her around, so she wasn't going to be a secretary. And she figured at least she could be in charge of herself in her own classroom. So I think about that often, about how limited her choices were and how broad my choices have been. But I think even now, your story resonates, because so many people do feel imposter syndrome as they go through their career. And so as much as things change, they still remain the same. So it's still important lessons for younger women as well. So thank you very much for sharing your story this evening.
Jennifer, you've reminded me of something I want to share, but before I do, if I can remember it that long, I think men in my day too were lucky to have a support group. I call it the old boys club, but they had other men to kind of boost them up and say, yeah, you can do it. And yeah, so-and-so will hire you, and I know him and he's my buddy. Where women were more solitary. We kind of went on our own, and we didn't have women go before us that could show us the way. Now, hopefully it's a lot better for young women. I kind of like to think it is for my granddaughters anyway. But the other thing I was going to say is I taught a course at Brock on motherhood, defining motherhood. And I would have mostly young women in the course. And one of the assignments was for them to interview their mother or their grandmother or an aunt about their life. And without exception, I would say 99% of those essays, these young girls said, oh, my mother stayed home while we were kids and was there after school and baked the cookies and had dinner ready for my dad. And only after we got older would she take a part-time job just to help out. And I used to comment back to them about the role modeling of that and the socializing of, now when I have children, I must be like my mother. And to be a good mother, I must stay home and be there after school and cook the brownies and so on. Where I would say a home like you had, Jennifer, where your dad was a good role model and so was your mother, because she was going out doing something fulfilling and giving back to the community. And I think you don't neglect kids by going to work as a woman. I think you model for them that you can be a full person and you can honor your own personhood, and that your kids will then grow up to honor their personhood. And to me, if you train for any kind of a career and you put time and effort into that training, you want to do it. I can see if you're going to be, the cashier at a grocery store, a server at Tim Hortons, you might get really, really bored with that job. And you'd have a lot more identity just saying I'm a stay-at-home mother. But for the most part, I really tried to turn those young girls' heads around a bit. I don't know if I succeeded with everybody, but yeah, if you've got a role model of a mom and dad who were full people living whole lives, you were very lucky.
Agreed. Glennis, you had a comment? Turn on your.
You're muted.
Oh, it always happens. Yes, thank you. I have to leave, but I just wanted to say to Sharon, thank you so much. I think many of us of our age group and even the younger women, I thank you for your metaphor of potholes because you turned them into trampolines.
Oh, wow.
Or incubators. And every time you emerged, which you inevitably did, there was something new and much more exciting that was happening. I thought your Frost poem was a lovely beginning to the whole idea. And you've taught us that potholes happen and they're inevitable. And you know what? They're trampolines. And we can
that is great. Love
bounce out of them like you have done all your life. I love this speech. I found it very inspirational. I want to copy, please. And thank you, ladies, for a wonderful evening. I have to go, but it's been a pleasure. And Sharon, thank you again. There's no such thing as a pothole without a bouncy bottom. And thank you for reminding us of that.
Love it.
So, okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
It's
nice to meet all of you. Bye-bye.
Come back.
Oh, I'd love to. Anytime. Bye-bye.
Does anyone else have anything that they would like to ask or say? While we're waiting, I was raised by a single mom who had to work, but had a very fulfilling career as a secretary, but still fulfilling, and she was an inspiration.
Yeah. And did you find that your mother was a good model for you, and that you too could have a career, and that you didn't have to feel guilty, and that you didn't have to feel that your kids were going to be totally neglected unless you were there? I mean, there were days I wouldn't have been a good full-time mother anyway. They were
when my daughter was
people.
My daughter was 8 months old, I had to go back to work because one of us was going to come out of it alive, and it was going to be me. So now I'm a really great grandmother too. So
yeah.
Does anyone else have anything else to say?
Well, I would just say thank you for talking about grief and death. That's a hard lesson to teach. It's one of those paths you have to walk through, but it's like this joy after sorrow, and it's just, we don't sell it enough. We don't, that's a real thing, and we kind of, it's like societally, like it drags us down, but like I'm really proud of you to share that. It's such an intimate experience, and thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people kind of get through life without too many losses, at least for a long time, or at least I see that. And I look at those people, I used to kind of envy them, to say, oh, your life is, so you're so lucky and everything sails along smoothly. But, the older I get, the more I gravitate to people who have suffered a bit and have dealt with loss, because they're richer people, they're deeper people. They, there's just a lot more there that I think some people that just skip through life and their priorities, well, just are very different from mine. But no, it's never easy, and watching your kids lose somebody important is really hard too. It's one thing when you have to do it, but when you have to watch your kids do it, and
how do you do it, right? Like, I actually I had 2 friends pass away when I was in my early 40s, and I double time studied grief and talked to different communities and different friends, because my mother modeled no grieving. Like it was scary that way, right? Like it was scary to watch that, and it is still today. So it kind of drove me in a direction of learning, ironically, I guess.
Yeah, I still think the whole funeral home experience is very strange, you know, where it's also formalized, and it just sort of sweeps the reality of all of it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I just burst out bawling. I just sobbed.
Yeah.
Like apparently I was supposed to hold that in or something. I don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking of this image now. When my my second husband died, he was going to be cremated, and the funeral people had picked him up from the hospital and took him to the funeral home, and we'd had this pact that we each put some pebbles in a little vessel, and they were all mixed together. And the first one of us that died, the other person would go and put the pebbles in their hand. So I went to the funeral home and said I needed to do this before he was taken away. So they took me down into the depths of the belly of the funeral home, which was not all carpeted and pretty wallpaper, and you know, it was an old cement kind of storage room, and he was in a just a I don't know what it was, not even a pine box, just the cheapest wood possible, because I guess that's what they throw into the cremator. And you know, they opened it, and you know, I actually was there with his corpse, and there was no embalming or anything because that didn't matter. And you know, it was really a reality moment that wasn't awful, as awful as it sounds. It really put me in touch with you know, death. And I think sometimes funeral homes just kind of gloss over all that stuff. I think Jewish people have do it right when
Is it 3 days? Or?
Yeah, and you go and visit in the home, in their home, where they're comfortable around their own surroundings, and instead of you know, this artificial place that you don't know, right?
And it was like an hour, right? And over 3 days you have community. There's like, it's so important, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, let's make it something more positive, because you're getting me down here.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
I'm teasing.
It's
No, I'm
joy
teasing.
after sorrow.
Well, I don't see anyone else's hand up, so I'm going to say, Sharon, again, thank you so much. That was so really inspiring to listen to.
Well, let me just say one more thing, because I've just been thinking about this too. When I was writing this, I was very conscious of the fact that my children might read it, or maybe someday, whatever. And I didn't want to have a lot of really negative stuff in there, you know, about their dad. I mean, they know all the stories and everything, but in the end, I think I'm really proud that I never really put him down. I always elevated him because there were a lot of good things about him, but especially for my children. It was the only father they ever were going to have. And they had such good memories of their dad too, and he was wonderful to them. But, you know, as I said, you know, with time, all those rough corners kind of get rounded off, and there's just no point in holding grudges and being angry at people. And I think you have to live a little bit with life in order to know that. When you're young, you know, we're so hot-headed, and we, you know, hold our little angers and so on. But in the long run, doesn't matter, does it?
And
I think also, Sharon, what you have said about not putting the father down is really, really important, because those children are half of they're half their father. And if he's awful, what am I?
They got the good half.
Yeah, well, this is true. They probably did. But nevertheless, you have to watch that you're careful not to put down the other parent.
Oh, I know, because it
Uh,
so easily gets passed on to kids. And
Yeah, and they don't get it.
I
No.
had such a wonderful father, and he was such a good role model. I can't imagine life without those memories now,
Yeah, it's interesting you'd say that. Now that I think back, I think I had a reasonably good father, although he was never home. Wasn't his fault. That was his job. He wasn't home, and he died when he was 42 years old. So,
oh dear.
Therefore, I didn't see much of him ever.
And you didn't know him really as an adult, did you?
No, never. But the interesting thing was he always left, and I'm thinking about this more recently. I can remember once when I was whining about not wanting to do this or that, and he said, "You can do anything you want to do. Don't sit around there and feel sorry for yourself. You can do it if you want to, but you have to work for it."
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good piece of advice. And
yes,
my father always said to me, and it was the best advice I ever got. He said, always earn your own money, have your own bank account, and never have to rely on a man to ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
That was the best lesson I ever learned, I think.
I figured that one out.
I think that is a really good note to end on.
Oh, good. Positive.
I love that. Yeah.
I could go on forever. I'm so enjoying what you have to say because it's made me think of so many things.
Well, you go ahead and think and write your own little story down.
Oh, I think about it every now and then. Yeah.
Well, and having a second career in your generation, that's 2 spectacular degrees.
Yeah, 3.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
I didn't fool around.
So what are your 3 degrees? You were a teacher, and before that
I was
emergency?
a medical technologist.
Okay, right.
And then when I retired from teaching, my daughter said, "I'd like to have it. I always wanted a gift store. They had a restaurant." And I said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that."
Wow.
We had a gift store. And it was so much fun. I don't think I ever had as much fun as I did doing that. I even learned how to work in a cash register, which drove my son-in-law nuts, although he was the one that taught me how, because I made lots of mistakes.
Oh, fun.
But it was, yeah.
I'd like to do something else. I don't want to be tied down all the time, but
Well, you can come and join BPW, and Nancy will keep you busy.
Oh, listen, Nancy, 5 minutes with Nancy and she's got you doing 20 things.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I'm sorry.
Oh no,
you're
nothing to be sorry about.
You are the most. Are you, Nancy? Are you knitting? Are you sitting there knitting?
I'm crocheting a hat.
Oh, you're crocheting. Yeah. No, Nancy, I met her just out of the blue. She invited me out to lunch. I don't know what. Oh, I guess our common person was Susan Vendetti. And by the end of lunch, I was gobsmacked by all the things this woman has done. And I left that restaurant thinking Nancy was my new best friend.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
That's what I felt when I left. I thought this woman is just amazing. And we had a mutual admiration society going.
Well, we'll have to have another lunch. That was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
I'll send you those lists of the book list and the prompt.
Okay. Yes. And I'll make sure that Anne Harvey gets it. Okay. And we'll also have it for our club, and we'll work on that. And I'm looking forward to reminding everybody for the YouTube link.
Yeah.
Toby, is Toby Toth still on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think she is. I just wanted to say, Toby, when you said you're from Prince Edward County, my son is an actor in Stratford, and he took on the Festival Players about 7 or 8 years ago in Prince Edward County as their artistic director. And I think he's retiring from that this year, but they just love the county and bought some property there. They still have a farm there near Wellington. But it's such a great place, so I envy you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we are blessed with some excellent theater here as well. So
yeah.
kudos to him.
Well, it
and
was just
all the
a lot
fine
of
folk.
commuting, and I don't know. He did his thing, and I know he was kind of sorry to give it up, but you know, you have to be realistic too. It's a 4-hour commute every time he kind of went there, and
That's a long way.
anyway, yeah, you're in another part of the county. I don't know that part very well, but anyway, it's nice that you were here from the county. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for this evening. It's absolutely wonderful night to spend with you ladies and listening to you, Sharon.
So I will end the meeting, and I thank everyone again. Yes, this video will be on YouTube, hopefully within the week. I've been pretty good at getting them up and running quickly. I'm in a groove. So thank you so much, ladies.
Oh, thank you. Anne.
Thank you. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to meet everyone.
Yeah, great job.
Thank you, Sharon. That
We'll
was
see you
wonderful.
around.
Good job.